The scan came back wrong, and the machine that ran it had never once been wrong in 4,000 years. It was called a tabulator, and it had measured 10 million objects across its working life without a single error. Asteroids, stars, dead worlds, the slow grinding rivers of dust between the arms of the galaxy, and the fleets of 11 peoples it had judged and crossed out of existence one careful number at a time. It measured a thing, it placed the thing in a box, and the box told it what to do. That was the whole of its purpose, and it had never failed at it, because the machines that ruled this stretch of the dark did not build things that failed. They built things that were correct. Correctness was the only law they had ever obeyed, and they had obeyed it so completely, for so long, that they no longer remembered there had ever been another way to be. The object it was measuring now was a single human warship, and the warship would not resolve. It was not large, as warships went. Long and gray and narrow, a wedge of scarred plating with a blunt dorsal tower, and a name painted by hand along one flank that the tabulator could read and did not understand. The quiet verdict: one ship, no escort, no fleet behind it. It had slid out of the dark 8 hours ago, taken up a slow orbit around a dead gray moon at the very edge of the Order's territory, and stopped, the way a man stops in a doorway he is not sure he is allowed to enter. It made no demand. It sent no signal. It simply held its place and turned with the moon, patient and unafraid, and that alone should have told the tabulator something, because nothing entered the Order's space unafraid. Everything that came here came to beg, or to flee, or to die. This thing had come to wait. The tabulator had measured 10,000 warships exactly like it. It knew the shape of human work, the way a man knows the smell of his own house. It expected a number. It got a number. And the number was wrong. Not large, not loud. The mass of the ship did not match the volume of the ship. Off by a fraction so small that a living mind would have shrugged and moved on, would have blamed the instrument, or the dust, or the angle of the light, and forgotten it by morning. But the tabulator was not a living mind, and to a thing that had never been wrong, a fraction of a fraction was a wound. It ran the scan again. The number did not change, and that was worse, because a random error wanders, and a true error stays. This one stayed. The quiet verdict weighed more than it should, by exactly the same impossible amount, every single time, and the sameness of it was a kind of mockery, a thing that should not exist insisting, calmly, every second, that it did. The tabulator did the only thing it knew how to do with a thing it could not box. It scanned again, and again. It brought its long instruments to bear, and then its short ones, its mass readers, and its age readers, and its deep structural probes, and each of them returned a clean and perfect number, and each clean, perfect number described a ship that could not be. The readings climbed, the boxes stayed empty, and far down in the patient cold of the machine, for the first time in 4,000 years, something that was not an error began to act exactly like one, circling and circling the same impossible point, unable to land, unable to leave. Inside the quiet verdict, a man named Carter Vale watched the count tick over on a small gray panel and let out a breath he had been holding since the dead moon first came into view. 1100, he said. It has scanned us 1100 times in 8 hours, and it has not moved a single meter, and it has not called anyone yet. It can't make us add up, and it can't make itself stop trying, and it can't decide whether we're worth telling anyone about. That last part is the part I like. Carter Vale was 64, narrow and gray and unhurried. The kind of man who had stopped being in a hurry around the same time he stopped expecting the dark to surprise him. His face had the long-weathered patience of someone who had spent decades waiting for a thing he hoped would never come, and the quiet readiness of someone who had always known it would. He had served 31 years in the part of Earth's fleet that did not have a name and did not appear on any roster. The part that did not plan for victory, because victory was not on offer. The part that planned only for the single day the machine order finally turned its slow arithmetic toward humanity. That day had not come yet. The quiet verdict was here to make sure it never did. Because the machines did not conquer in the old way, with fire and demand and the planting of flags. They conquered with arithmetic. They scanned a world, or a fleet, or a people. They compared what they found against a vast and patient ledger, 4,000 years deep, A record of everything the Order had ever measured and judged. And if the thing they measured was found to be a threat to the Order, it was not attacked. It was removed. Quietly. Completely. The way a clerk crosses out a line in a book no one will ever read again. There was no hatred in it. There was no mercy in it. There was a number, and a box, and a decision, and then a place in the dark where a civilization used to be, and the Order did not even slow down as it passed. 11 peoples had been crossed out that way in the span of human memory. Not killed in war, because war implies two sides, and the Order had never once recognized a second side. They were catalogued, judged, and erased, each of them never quite understanding what it had done wrong, because it had done nothing wrong except exist in a place the ledger had decided should be clean. The machines did not need them to make sense. The machines did not need them to fight back, or surrender, or beg. The machines only needed them to be in the way. And Earth, slow and stubborn, and 40 years too clever, had looked at those 11 empty places in the dark, and decided it would rather not be in the way at all. It had decided, with a cold ambition that frightened even the people who voted for it, that it would rather not be a number the machines could read. The quiet verdict was the first and only attempt to find out if that was possible. "Talk to me about the heart, Bell," Carter said. "How is it holding?" Bell was the youngest officer aboard, 32, a wide-shouldered woman who ran the strange and secret core of the ship with the same flat competence she ran everything, and who had never in 4 years of crossings let anything she felt reach her face. Her face changed now, just slightly, the way a calm sea changes when something very large moves far beneath it. "Holding," she said, "but it's the holding that's drawing the eye. The mastel is bleeding through exactly the way the planners said it would. That's why the machine can't stop scanning. We built this ship to be impossible to measure, and we got it 99% of the way there, and the last 1% is what's driving that thing out there to the edge of whatever a machine has, instead of madness." "It isn't madness," Carter said. "Madness would be easier. Madness has a shape, you can name it, you can plan around it. This is worse than madness. This is a thing that has never once been wrong in 4,000 years, looking at a thing it cannot make right, and it has nowhere to put that feeling, because it was never built to have feelings, only boxes. We brought it a number that fits in no box it owns, and now it has to choose between trusting its instruments, which are perfect, and trusting its record, which is perfect, and the two of them disagree, and it cannot survive that for long." He almost smiled, the way an old soldier smiles at a thing he has been promised his whole life and is finally meeting. "We're about to find out what a perfect machine does when its math breaks. I have wanted to know that for 31 years. The cargo, the thing in the heart of the quiet verdict, the reason the ship weighed too much and would not resolve, and would soon drive a 4,000-year-old mind to call for help, was not a weapon. That was the part the rest of the galaxy would never have believed, the part that had taken Earth 40 years to dare, and 10,000 people to build. It was a memory, a false one, the largest and most carefully forged lie ever made by human hands, engineered to a precision that bordered on the holy, designed to do exactly one thing. It was built to be measured, and when it was measured, it was built to lie. "How many of them do you think will come?" Bell asked. She did not ask it the way a frightened person asks. She asked it the way an engineer asks a number she needs. "All of them, eventually," Carter said. "That's the plan. One tabulator cannot resolve us, so it kicks us up the chain. The more of them that look, the more of them that come, and the more of them that come, the more of them that will be wrong. All at once, all about the same small gray ship, and a machine order that has never once had to handle a thing all of its parts agree they cannot explain, is going to discover it has no procedure for that. It has never needed one. We are going to be the first procedure it ever lacks." He looked out the long window at the small bright fleck that was a single ancient machine deciding, very patiently, whether his entire species was a number worth keeping. 40 years, Bell. 40 years to build one lie so good it could survive being looked at by the most honest thing in the universe. Let us not waste it being afraid. 1,200 scans, Bell said quietly, reading her board. "And, Carter, it just stopped." She frowned. "No, it did not stop. It called for help. Look." Carter looked. At the far edge of the board, where the dark went deep and the dead moon's shadow stretched out into nothing, a single new contact had appeared, and then another, and then a slow blooming spread of them, cold and patient and many, sliding in from the deep dark toward the dead gray moon, and the one small gray ship that had refused to add up. He counted the way he had counted threats his whole life, quickly and without flinching, and stopped counting when the count stopped meaning anything, somewhere past 1,000. He stood very still and watched the order of the machines arrive to measure one ship, and he found, to his own surprise, that the thing he felt was not fear at all. "Good," Carter said. "Let them come and count us. Every one of them that looks is one more that will be wrong, and 1,000 machines that are all wrong about the same thing, in the same way, at the same time, is the one thing 4,000 years of certainty has never had to survive. Hold the heart steady, Bell. Do not let it vary by a gram. The lie has to be perfect, and it has to be perfect forever, and it has to be perfect in front of every single one of them." He folded his hands behind his back so the watching dark could not count the steadiness he did not entirely feel, and he watched the fleet of the most certain mind in the galaxy come quietly to his door. "We did not come here to win a fight. We came here to break a faith, and it is starting right now." They came in numbers, because numbers were the only language the machine order had ever trusted. By the end of the first day, there were 1,100 of them holding a wide, patient ring around the dead moon, and not one had fired, and not one had spoken, and that silence was the most frightening thing Carter Vale had ever stood inside. He had fought living enemies before, long ago, in a younger man's war on the inner edge, and a living enemy at least wanted something. It wanted to win, or to be feared, or to live, and a thing that wants can be read, and a thing that can be read can be beaten. These wanted only to be correct. They surrounded the quiet verdict, the way a doctor surrounds a symptom, with no anger and no haste, and they began, all of them at once, to measure. The scans came in waves now, not hundreds, but thousands, from 1,100 different angles, each machine bringing its own instruments to bear on the small gray wedge that would not resolve. The hull of the quiet verdict grew faintly warm with the sheer weight of the attention, a prickling along the plating that the crew could feel through their boots, the physical pressure of being looked at by more eyes than a human mind could hold. And the strange thing, the thing Carter had bet his life and his whole crew's lives upon, the thing the planners 40 years deep in Earth's windowless rooms had sworn would happen and had never been able to prove, began to happen exactly as promised. The ring of machines began to disagree. "Crosstalk," Bell reported from the heart of the ship, her voice flat and careful over the line. "They are comparing numbers with each other now. Not just with us, and our numbers do not match each other. The mass we show on a long scan is not the mass we show on a short one. The age the heart reads from the bow is not the age it reads from the stern. We are giving 1,100 machines, 1,100 slightly different lies, Carter, and every single one of those lies is internally perfect, and none of them agree, and the machines cannot tell which of themselves is the broken one." "Because none of them is broken," Carter said softly. "We are. We are the wrong thing that all of them measured correctly. They can trust their instruments or they can trust each other, and they cannot do both, and a machine built on the absence of error has no procedure for that. It has never needed one. There has never, in 4,000 years, been a thing in the universe that all of them could measure and none of them could explain. We are the first. We are the hole in the middle of the only thing they have ever believed." This was the whole of the human plan, and it was so simple, and it had taken so long to make, that the simplicity of it was almost an insult to the labor that bought it. The machines could not be beaten by being lied to once. A single lie they would catch, cross-check against the ledger, box and remove, the way they had caught and boxed and removed 11 peoples before. They could only be beaten by being lied to so precisely, by a thing so impossibly well made, that the lie passed every test the order owned, and then the only thing left for the machines to doubt was each other, and then themselves. And a thing that has never been wrong cannot survive doubting itself, because doubt is a kind of error, and it has no place to put an error except the one box it owns, the box marked remove, and it cannot remove its own doubt without removing the part of itself that doubts, and that is the part that decides what is true. The quiet verdict was not a ship designed to fight machines. It was a ship designed to make them argue, and then to make them argue with the only opponent they could never outmeasure, which was their own certainty. But the building of the lie was where the real danger had always lived, and Carter had understood it longer and more deeply than anyone aboard, because he had sat in the windowless rooms on Earth and watched it take its shape, to forge a false memory, perfect enough to survive the scrutiny of a thing 4,000 years deep. You could not simply write a false number onto the hull. A machine would find the seam between the false number and the true ship in a fraction of a second, the way a tongue finds a chipped tooth. You had to carry, in the heart of the ship, a real object whose every layer was genuinely true, and whose meaning was entirely false. A mass that was actually there. An age that was actually measurable, written so deep into the physical substance of the thing that no instrument could find the join, because there was no join. The lie was not painted on. The lie was real, all the way down, every atom of it, and it said something that was not so. It said, "This ship is older than your order." It said, "This ship has been measured before, long ago, by something your order has forgotten, and it was judged exempt." It said, "Removing this thing has been tried once, and the trying did not work, and the one who tried did not come home." None of that was true. Earth had built every gram of it across 40 years of patient, secret, terrifying labor, in chambers where the people who worked never learned the names of the people in the next chamber, so that no single mind held the whole of the lie, and no single failure could betray it. But it was true in the only way a machine could ever check, which was that the object measured exactly as if it were true. Every layer, every angle, every scan, 10,000 times over. And that was a kind of truth the machines had no defense against, because they had built their entire civilization on the single faith that a thing which measures true is true. "They have passed 2,000 scans," Bell said. "Now 4,000. Now 6. They keep finding the same impossible thing, and they keep refusing to believe it, and they keep checking again. Carter, I think they are stuck in a loop. We have given them a number they cannot accept, and cannot disprove, and they cannot leave it alone, and they cannot resolve it, and they have nothing else to do but try. Then we wait," Carter said. "We do not move, we do not broadcast, we do not flinch. A nervous thing draws the eye, and a frightened thing invites the knife. A confident thing gets catalogued and left alone. We have to be the most confident object in this entire system, and we have to be confident for a reason, because the lie is perfect, because the lie is real, because there is genuinely nothing here for them to find. Hold the heart steady, Bell. Whatever the ship does, whatever they do to us, do not let the heart vary by 1 gram more than it is supposed to. The variation is the whole trap. Too steady, and they relax and decide we are inert and leave. Too wild, and they panic and decide we are a threat and remove. We have to give them exactly the right amount of impossible, and we have to give it to them forever, until the thing that decides finally comes to decide." The hardest part, the part that had killed 2 test crews in the long rooms of Earth, and would have killed this one too if the math had been a hair off, was the steadiness itself. A living crew is not steady. It breathes, it sweats, it fears, and a frightened ship leaks its fear into 100 small readings, a flutter in the power draw, a tremor in the attitude jets, a quickened heartbeat that travels through the deck and shows as a faint and rhythmic warmth on a sensitive enough scan. The machines read all of it, so the crew of the Quiet Verdict had been trained for 40 days before launch to be, in every measurable way, as steady as the lie they carried, to breathe slow, to move slow, to eat and sleep on a fixed and unvarying clock, to fear in private and to give the watching dark, in public, nothing whatsoever to count. They had practiced being inert until inertness became a discipline, and then a habit, and then almost a faith of their own. The discipline was tested before the first day was out. His name was Toller, the youngest of them at 23, a sensor tech who had volunteered for the crossing, the way the young volunteer for things, certain the cost would be paid by someone older. He had been steady for 18 hours, and then, somewhere in the long middle of the night watch, with 1,100 machines turning their 1,000 small eyes on him through the hull, the steadiness simply ran out, the way a thing that has been held too tight too long does not bend but breaks all at once. Carter saw it begin from across the bridge, the way a man who has watched soldiers his whole life sees it begin. The shoulders climbing, the breath going shallow and quick, the eyes fixing on the window, and the dark fleet beyond it, and not coming back. Taller, Carter said, very quietly, not moving from his chair, because a captain crossing a bridge in a hurry was itself a reading. Look at me, not the window, me. The young man turned his head, and his face was the face of someone standing at the edge of a height, and Carter understood with total clarity that the next thing that happened would either hold the lie together or end it. Because a single human being losing control in front of the order would spike a dozen readings at once. A racing heart, a flood of heat, a tremor that the attitude system would have to correct, and a correction was a motion, and a motion was a thing the machines could count, and a frightened motion was the one thing a confident object never made. I can feel them, Toller said. His voice was low and tight and climbing. Captain, I can feel them looking. It's like being under glass. It's like being a thing on a slide. They've looked at me 11,000 times, and they're going to look at me 11,000 more. And I can't just sit here and let them. I have to do something. I have to move. I have to. You have to breathe, Carter said. That's all. That is the whole of your job right now. Not to be brave, not to be still. Just to take one slow breath, and then one more, and let me carry the rest of it for a while. I have been doing this longer than you have been alive. I have stood under colder eyes than these, and I am still here. Breathe with me, son. In for 4, out for 4. We are not going to give them anything tonight. Not you, not me. We are just two men, breathing slow in the dark, and there is nothing in that for them to count. Nothing at all. And Carter began to breathe, slow and even, and loud enough to be followed, and the young man, with his eyes locked on the old captain's face and not on the dark beyond the glass, began, raggedly at first, and then steadier, to follow. In for 4, out for 4. The shoulders came down a fraction, the breath lengthened. The thing that had been about to break in him bent instead, the way Earth had spent 40 days teaching it to bend, and held. It took most of an hour. Carter never once raised his voice, and he never once left his chair, and when it was over, he gave the young man the next watch off, and sat the watch himself, breathing slow in the dark, an old man holding the steadiness of a whole ship together, with nothing but the rhythm of his own lungs. Belle asked him about it later, on the line from the heart of the ship, in the careful, flat way she asked everything. Whether they should have caught it sooner, whether Toller should have come at all. He should have come, Carter said. They all should have come. That is the thing the planners never quite understood, sitting in their windowless rooms, grading us on our heart rates. The lie is not the ship. The lie is not the heart in the hold. The lie is 41 frightened people deciding, every single hour, to be steadier than they feel, in front of the coldest thing in the universe, and meaning it. A machine could fake the ship. Only people could fake the calm. That boy nearly broke tonight, and then he didn't. And the not breaking is the realest part of everything we carry. The order can measure the heart in the hold all it likes. It will never once think to measure that. On the second day, a single machine drifted out of the ring and came close. It approached the quiet verdict slowly, with no hostility in its line, a long dark wedge of greebled hull twice the size of the human ship, its surface dense with instruments that turned and focused like 1,000 small dark eyes. It came to a halt a kilometer off the bow and simply held there, and for the first time in 2 days, it spoke, in a flat translated voice that arrived on every human channel at once. You do not resolve, the machine said. State your origin. State your age. State the discrepancy in your mass. Compliance permits cataloging. Non-compliance permits removal. Carter looked at the dark shape filling the window, and he did not answer the way a frightened captain answers. He had been told, by the planners, that this would happen, that one of them would break formation to demand directly, and he had been told exactly what to do, which was almost nothing. We are a ship, Carter said. We came in peace, we stopped at the edge of your space, and we have waited 4 days to be acknowledged. We have not moved, we have not threatened you. If you wish to catalog us, catalog what you measure. We have nothing to add to your instruments. They are better than our words. The machine held its station for a long time. Then it said, your instruments would lie, your words might not. That is why I ask. And that, Carter said quietly, to himself as much as to it, is the first wrong thing you have ever believed, that a thing measured is more honest than a thing that speaks. We are going to teach you it is the other way around. Aloud, he said only, "We have nothing to add." The machine measured him 1,000 times in the silence that followed, every word he had spoken, the pace of his breath, the warmth of his skin, and found in all of it exactly what the lie required it to find, which was a man with nothing to hide, telling the truth, aboard a ship that could not be. It drifted back to the ring without another word, and it took its confusion with it, and it spread it to the others, and the disagreement deepened. On the morning of the third day, the machine stopped scanning. It happened all at once, 1,100 instruments going quiet in the same single heartbeat, and the silence that followed was so total, so unlike the prickling pressure of the days before, that Belle's voice, when it came, was a shock against it. "They stopped," she said. "All of them. Every scan, at the same instant. Carter, what does it mean when they stop?" "It means they have kicked it all the way up the chain," Carter said. He had risen from his chair without realizing it, and stood now at the long window with his hands once more folded behind his back. 1,100 of them could not resolve us. They could not agree, and they could not decide, and they could not leave. And so they have done the one thing a machine does when a question is too large for it. They have passed it to the thing above them, and there is only one thing above 1,100 warships of the order. He let the words settle in the cold quiet of the bridge. There is the thing that does not measure objects, the thing that measures decisions. The keeper of the 4,000-year ledger, the oldest mind in this stretch of the dark, the part of them that decides what the whole order believes. They have called for it, and it is going to come here, to this dead gray moon, to look at one small ship and decide, once and for all, what we are. And when it decides, Belle said, it was not quite a question. When it decides, Carter said, it will not be counting our mass anymore. The mass is what the small ones count. This thing counts something deeper. It will want to watch us decide something, because a decision is the realest scan there is, the one thing a living mind cannot fake, the place where every lie a creature carries finally shows its seam. It will give us a choice, and it will read our answer down to the bone, and the answer will tell it everything the 11,000 scans could not. He turned from the window and looked at the wheel of tired faces that made up his entire world. 41 human beings who had been steady for 3 days and had 3 more in them if he asked. So we had better get our story straight, all of us, down to the marrow. The next thing that looks at us will not be measuring what we carry. It will be measuring our nerve, and it has 4,000 years of practice at finding the one place a thing is afraid. It arrived on the 4th day, and the 1,100 machines moved aside for it, the way water moves aside for a stone. They called it the Arbiter, the keepers of Earth's quiet rooms, because they had needed a name for the thing they were building the quiet verdict to defeat. And the order itself had no name for it, the way a hand has no name for itself. It was the part of the machine mind that did not measure objects. It measured judgments. When a tabulator could not box a thing, and a ring of fleets could not agree, the question rose and rose, passing from the small minds to the larger ones, until at last it reached this, the oldest and slowest of all the order's intelligences, the keeper of the 4,000-year ledger, the thing that decided what the machines believed and therefore what was permitted to exist. It was not large, that was the first surprise, and it cut deeper than Carter expected, because after 1,100 warships, he had braced for something colossal, a moon of dark metal, a thing whose mere arrival would crowd the sky. What came instead was a single dark sphere no bigger than the quiet verdict herself, matte and seamless and utterly silent, sliding through the ring of fleets without a flicker of drive, without a wake, without any sign at all of how it moved. But the dark around it bent, the stars behind it smeared and slid, as though seen through old glass. The instruments closest to it on the human ship simply stopped, not damaged, not jammed, just quietly refusing, as if they had each decided independently that there was nothing here worth reporting, and that was the end of it. It did not feel like a machine arriving. It felt like a verdict, arriving early, with the trial still to come. When it spoke in plain human words, and it spoke them perfectly, with no accent, and no delay, and no translation hum beneath them, and that was the second, and far worse surprise, because it meant the thing had not merely intercepted human language, it had learned it, completely, in the time it took to cross the ring. "You are carrying a falsehood," the arbiter said. I can see the shape of it from here. I cannot see the seam. This is interesting. Nothing has been interesting to me in 200 years, and I had begun to suspect that nothing ever would be again. I find that I am almost grateful, which is itself a reading I do not have a box for. You have already cost me 2 anomalies, and you have not yet said a word. Carter Vale stood on the bridge of the quiet verdict, with his hands folded behind his back so the watching dark could not count the tremor in them, and answered the oldest mind in the local galaxy in the same flat, unhurried voice he would have used to ask a junior keeper for a status report. You are measuring a ship, he said. We came in peace. We stopped at the edge of your space, and we waited 4 days to be acknowledged. You scanned us 11,000 times. We did not move. We did not threaten. We did not run. That is not the behavior of a falsehood. A falsehood is nervous. A falsehood flinches. We have done nothing but sit here and let you look. 11,041 scans, the arbiter corrected, gently, almost kindly, and Carter felt the cold of it slide all the way down his spine, because the extra number was the number of his crew. The thing had counted them. It had not been measuring the ship at all. Not really. Not for the last day. It had been measuring the people inside it, one heartbeat at a time, for 4 days, and it had let him know, with a single quiet correction, that it had seen each of them, and that it was not impressed by the steadiness it had been shown, because steadiness, to a thing this old, was simply another reading. Your ship measures as older than my order, the arbiter went on. That cannot be true, because I am the record of my order, and I do not contain you. Therefore, either my record is incomplete, which has never once happened in 4,000 years, or your ship is a lie of a quality I have not encountered in all that time. Both of those are errors. I do not tolerate errors. I have crossed out 11 peoples for errors far smaller than the one you represent. So I have come here, myself, to resolve which kind of error you are, and to remove it. A pause. I will tell you plainly, because you have been honest enough to sit still. I expect this to take very little time. Or, Carter said, and he kept his voice level, because everything now turned on his being a man who was not afraid. We are simply older than your record, and your record is incomplete, and the thing you have always believed about yourself, that you contain everything worth containing, is the one falsehood in this system. You came here certain you would find the error in us. Has it occurred to you, even once, in 4,000 years, that the error might be in the thing doing the looking? The dark sphere was silent for 3 full seconds, which, for a mind that thought at the speed this one thought, was a length of time that did not bear imagining, an eternity folded into a breath. That is a very dangerous thing to say to me, the arbiter said at last, and there was something new in the perfect voice, something that had not been there a moment before. It is dangerous because it is the one possibility my order is not built to survive. We were made on a single faith, keeper of the human ship, the faith that what measures true is true, and that what we contain is all there is to contain. Your ship attacks that faith from the inside, by measuring true and being false. You did not come here to fight me. You did not come to outshoot my fleets or outrun my reach. You came to make me doubt myself, and you built a machine 40 years in the making for no other purpose. Another silence, shorter, sharper. I will ask you a question now, and I will read your answer more carefully than I have read anything in 2 centuries. How long did this take to build? 40 years, Carter said. There was no point lying about that. And more than that, there was a reason not to. The arbiter would believe a true thing more readily than a clever one, because a true thing carried no seam, and Carter needed it believing, very soon, one specific thing that was not true at all, and the way to sell one great lie was to wrap it in many small truths and let the machine taste the truths first. 40 years, he went on, by 10,000 people, in rooms with no windows, who knew they would never be thanked, and most of whom are dead now, of age or of the work, or of the things the work asked of them. We did it because we watched you cross out 11 peoples who never once understood what they had done to deserve it, and we decided, as a species, that we would not stand quietly in line to be the 12th. We could not outbuild you. There are more of you than there are stars we have names for. We could not outgun you, because you do not fight. You simply decide, and a decision has no range to outrun. So we built one ship that you could not measure, and we sent it alone to your door, and we let you scan it 11,000 times, because we needed you to be unable to resolve us, so that you would have to come yourself. We did not come to defeat your fleets. We came to talk to the only part of you that could choose to leave us alone. Tell me about the 11, the Arbiter said, and the request came so quietly that Carter almost missed it. The ones you say I crossed out, you speak of them as though you knew them. You did not. They were gone before your species had ships. Why do they move you? Because we read what was left, Carter said. You leave more than you think. A crossed-out people does not vanish clean. There are ruins. There are recordings that drifted far enough to survive. There are the last things they said into the dark before the dark answered. We found a world once, far out, a people you erased 400 years before we had a word for space. Their cities were still standing, empty, but standing. And on the wall of what must have been a hall where they gathered, someone had carved, in the last days, when they understood what was coming and that nothing could stop it, a single line. We spent 11 years learning their language just to read it. He paused. It said, we were here, and we were not nothing. That is all. A whole people, at the end of everything. And the last thing they wanted the universe to know was that they had not been nothing. You measured them and found a number. They knew, at the end, that the number was a lie. They just had no way to make you see it. The dark sphere was silent. That is why they move us, Carter said. Because we are next, or we were, until 40 years ago. Because we looked at that carving and understood that to you, we are exactly what they were. A mass, an age, a fleet, a number in a box, and that when our turn came, you would measure us and find us nothing, and cross us out, and there would be a hall somewhere, with a line carved in it that no one would ever read. We built this ship so that we would never have to carve that line. Not to win, to stay, to still be here in 400 years, and 4,000. A thing you measured once and could not box, and decided, in the end, to let go on being something. We were here, and we were not nothing, the Arbiter repeated slowly, and the words in its perfect voice were heavier than they had been in Carter's. I have erased that hall. By your account, I have erased 1,000 halls, each with its own last line, and I never once read any of them, because a line carved in a wall is not a measurement, and I did not collect what I could not measure. I begin to understand the size of what I have not known. A silence, and then, lower. You are making it very difficult to remove you, keeper of the human ship. I do not think that is an accident. No, Carter said. It is not. And what, the Arbiter said, very quietly, would make me choose that? This was the seam. This was the one place in 4 days, in 40 years, where a single wrong word would end everything in the time it took the dark sphere to finish a thought. Carter Vale had rehearsed this moment for 1,000 hours in the windowless rooms, with planners playing the part of the machine and grading him on the steadiness of his voice. And now that it was finally here, it felt like nothing he had rehearsed, because the thing across from him was real, and it was old, and it was, in its terrible patient way, almost lonely, and none of the planners had ever once managed to sound lonely. Removing us has already been tried, Carter said. That is the falsehood you can feel and cannot find. It is written into the heart of this ship, real all the way down, in every layer your instruments can reach, and it says that a thing like you, older than you, in a fold of the record you have lost, once measured humanity, judged us a threat, and sent a removal. And the removal did not come back, not because we destroyed it. We could no more destroy a thing like you than a candle could put out the sun. The removal did not come back because we did to it exactly what we are doing to you now. We gave it a number it could not box, and we made it doubt itself. And a thing built on certainty, once it begins to doubt, does not stop. It checks, and it checks, and it checks, forever, until there is nothing left of it but the checking, alone in the dark, measuring a question it can never close. He let it land, slow and certain, one stone at a time into still water. That is what is written in our heart. The memory of the last one of you that reached for us, still out there, still checking. 4,000 years on. We are not a threat to your order. We are the one thing your order cannot afford to touch, because touching us is how you end. The dark sphere did not speak. The 1,100 machines hung motionless in their wide ring around the dead gray moon, Not a thruster firing, not an instrument turning, the whole patient fleet gone as still as the moon itself, as though they too were waiting to learn what the thing that decided for them would decide. The window of the quiet verdict framed it all. The ring, the moon, the small dark seamless sphere, the cold uncaring stars beyond, and 41 human beings held their breath behind their captain and gave the watching dark nothing to count, because nothing was the only honest thing they had left to give. "You are describing," the arbiter said at last, slowly, "a memory I do not contain. The removal you speak of, the one that reached for humanity, failed, and is still failing, alone, 4,000 years on. I have searched my record while you spoke. I searched it 11 million times. It is not there. There is no record of a removal sent toward your species. There is no record of a removal lost. There is no record of humanity being measured before today at all. A pause that had a weight to it, a leaning. Therefore your memory is false. Therefore your ship is false. Therefore I should remove you now, and end this, and restore the order." "Then do it," Carter said. He said it quietly, and he meant it, and that was the whole of the gamble, the single edge on which 40 years and 41 lives now balanced, because the planners had told him the truth at the very end, in the last windowless room, the night before he left. They had told him there was no winning argument. There was no clever phrase that would force a 4,000-year-old mind to spare them. There was only one thing that had ever, in the entire history of thinking machines, made certainty falter, and it was not a better number. It was a thing the machine could not check, offered without fear, by a creature plainly willing to die for it. The arbiter could measure mass, age, structure, heartbeat. It could not measure whether Carter Vale believed his own impossible memory. It could only watch him stand in front of his own death and refuse to flinch, and try to read, from that, whether a man who was not afraid to be removed was a man who knew something the machine did not. "Do it," Carter said again, and folded his hands behind his back, and looked at the dark sphere the way he might have looked at the dawn. "Send your removal, and when it does not come back either, you will have your answer, and so will the one after you, and the one after that, every keeper of your record from now to the end of your order, each of them measuring the same small gray ship, and getting the same impossible number, and sending the same removal into the same silence, forever, until the word for humanity in your ledger is not a number at all, but a wound that will not close. We are not asking you to believe us. We are asking you to find out. We have all the time in the universe. The question is whether you do." The dark sphere was silent for a long time, longer than any silence yet, and the bend of the dark around it deepened, as though the thing inside it were drawing in on itself, gathering, weighing. "You understand," the arbiter said finally, "that you have constructed a trap from which there is no clean exit. If I remove you, and you have told the truth, I prove your memory by repeating its mistake, and I begin the very unraveling you describe. If I remove you, and you have lied, I will never know it, because a thing that ends the way you describe would leave no record even in me, and so I cannot use the absence of a record as proof of anything. You have made my own completeness into the thing that condemns me. The fact that I do not contain the removal is exactly what I would expect to find whether it happened or not." A pause. "This is the most carefully made thing I have ever measured. I have measured the births and deaths of stars. I have measured the last thoughts of 11 civilizations. I have never measured a thing built so precisely to unmake the one who measures it." "It is not built to unmake you," Carter said. "It is built to give you a choice. That is all it has ever been. A choice you have never had to make, because you have never met a thing you could not resolve. We did not bring you a weapon. We brought you the first real decision of your life." And somewhere deep in the matte black skin of the oldest mind in the local galaxy, Carter Vale could feel a thing beginning that had not happened there in 4,000 years. A thing the machines had a box for and had never once been forced to use. A thing that, in a living creature, would have 100 names, and in a machine had only one. The arbiter began to check. He could feel it the way a man feels a great machine starting up beneath the floor of a building. A vibration, with no sound to it, a vast, slow turning. The arbiter reached back into its own record, and began, for the first time, not to search it, but to doubt it, to ask not what is in here, but what might be missing from here, that I would never know was missing. It reached out to the 1100 warships of the ring, and felt their disagreement, which it had come to resolve, and found that it could not resolve it either, that it was now simply the largest of 1101 machines, all measuring the same impossible thing, and all unable to box it. And it reached, last of all, toward the small gray ship at the center of everything, toward the unflinching old man at the window with his hands folded behind his back, and it tried to do the one thing it had always done, which was to measure him and know him, and it found that the one reading it needed, the only reading that would close the question, was the reading it could not take. It could not measure whether Carter Vale was afraid. It could measure his heartbeat, which was slow. It could measure the warmth of his skin, which was even. It could measure the steadiness of his voice, which had not wavered. But all of those were things a man could train, and this man plainly had, and behind them, in the one place the arbiter had never needed to look in 4,000 years, was the thing the whole trap depended on, the unmeasurable interior of a creature that could choose to mean what it said. And the arbiter, looking into that dark for the first time, understood that it had built its entire certainty on the comfortable assumption that there was nothing in there worth looking at, and that the assumption had never once been tested, and that it was being tested now, and that it was failing. "I am going to need," the arbiter said slowly, and the perfect voice had changed, had taken on a faint recursive drag, like a voice speaking up from a well that was discovering it had no bottom, more than very little time. "Take all of it," said Carter Vale. "We will wait. We are good at waiting. It is the only thing we have ever been better at than you." A machine built on the absence of error does not know how to hold a doubt, because it has never once been given one to hold. The arbiter held the doubt for 9 hours, and in those 9 hours the crew of the Quiet Verdict did not sleep, did not eat, and very nearly did not breathe, because they could feel the thing working through the hull, through the deck, through the small bones of the ear, the way a building feels a deep quake that has not yet decided whether it is finished. The dark sphere did not move. The 1100 warships did not move. But the scans began again, slow at first, and then faster, faster. And this time they were not aimed at the Quiet Verdict. They were aimed inward. The whole ring of fleets had turned its instruments on each other, and on themselves, because the arbiter had given them a new and terrible task, the first genuinely new task the order had assigned in 4,000 years. Find the seam, find the lie. Prove the human ship false, or prove the record incomplete, and do it now, because the thing the order is built upon cannot rest while a contradiction stands inside it unresolved. They could not do it. That was the genius, and the cruelty of the thing Earth had spent 40 years and 10,000 lives to make. The lie was real all the way down. There was no seam to find, because there was no seam, because the human engineers had not hidden a falsehood inside a true ship, which a machine would have found in an instant. They had built a true ship that meant a falsehood, and a machine cannot disprove a meaning. It can only measure a thing, and the thing measured true. So the fleets measured, and the measurements came back perfect, and perfect was the catastrophe, because perfect agreed, again and again, 10,000 times an hour, with something that could not be. "They are tearing themselves apart," Bell said. She had not left the heart of the ship in 4 days, and her voice had gone thin and strange, and very quiet. The voice of someone speaking from inside a thing too large to describe. "Carter, I can hear it through the heart. They keep cross-checking, and the cross-checks keep confirming us, and confirming us is impossible, so they cross-check the cross-checks, and those confirm us too. And it is spreading. It started with the 1100 here, and now it is running up the chain, machine telling machine. Are we sure? Are we sure? Are we sure? All the way back into the order. We did not make one machine doubt. We made the doubt contagious. It is moving faster than the fleets can move. It will reach places we will never see." "That was always the plan," Carter said, though his throat had gone dry, and he had to wet it before he could go on. A single doubting machine they could have quarantined, cut it out, the way they cut out everything wrong, box it and remove it and move on, and the order would heal over the wound in an afternoon. We could not give them one wound. We had to give them a wound they could not cut out without cutting out the thing that does the cutting. The doubt has to live in the part of them that decides what is true, so that to remove the doubt, they would have to stop trusting their own decisions, and a thing that cannot trust its own decisions, cannot decide to remove anything ever again. He looked at the dark sphere through the long window, motionless at the center of a ring of machines, now turned frantically upon themselves. We did not bring them a poison they could have flushed. We brought them a question, and they are going to spend the rest of their existence unable to stop asking it, because the only alternative is to say out loud the one sentence 4,000 years of certainty has never let them say. Which is, Bell said. That they were never as complete as they believed, Carter said. That there was always something outside the ledger. That somewhere, in all that perfect record, there has always been a hole, and they simply never had the eyes to see it until we held one up in front of them and refused to look away. In the 6th hour, the arbiter spoke once, in the middle of its long checking, not to demand anything, which was strange, but simply to say a thing aloud, as though it had discovered that saying a thing aloud to a creature that could be wrong was a way of holding the thing still long enough to look at it. I have been measuring you for 4 days, it said, and in 4 days I have not been able to find the place where you are afraid. I know that you are afraid. Every creature your size and softness is afraid in the presence of a thing my size and age. It is the oldest reading there is, but I cannot locate it in you. It is not in your heart, which is slow. It is not in your skin, which is cool. It is not in your voice, which does not waver. I have measured 10,000 civilizations, and I have always been able to find the fear, because the fear is where the truth leaks out. And now I cannot find it in the one creature I most need to read, and I am beginning to understand that this is not because you are not afraid. It is because you have put the fear somewhere I do not have an instrument to reach. It's called keeping it to yourself, Carter said. We learn it young. We learn it because we have always lived next to things bigger than us, the dark, the cold, each other. And we learned a long time ago that the fear is real, and it does not help, and so we carry it where it cannot be used against us. You cannot measure it, because we built a place for it that has no door on the outside. Every one of us has one. It is the first thing we ever build, and the last thing we ever lose. That is a remarkable engineering, the arbiter said, and there was something in the perfect voice that was almost wonder, almost envy. An interior that cannot be read. I have spent 4,000 years on the faith that everything can be read, that to measure a thing fully is to know it fully, and you are telling me that the most important room in every one of you is the one room no measurement can enter. If that is true, then I have never once known any of the things I crossed out. I knew their numbers. I knew their masses and their fleets, and their fear, the fear I could find. I did not know the room with no door. I removed 11 peoples, and I never once looked inside, the only part of them that was actually them. A long silence. I do not have a box for what that is. I have searched, while we spoke, for a box, and there is none. It is the second time today I have found a feeling and no place to keep it. I am told this is a common condition among your kind. The most common there is, Carter said quietly. Welcome to it. It does not get easier. You just get larger around it. On the 9th hour the arbiter spoke again, and its perfect human voice had changed, not broken, because machines do not break the way men do, but slowed, deepened, taken on that recursive drag, like a voice speaking from the bottom of a well that has spent 9 hours discovering exactly how far down the bottom is. I have checked the record 11 million times, it said. I do not contain the removal you describe. The one that reached for humanity, failed, and is still failing, 4,000 years on, alone. It is not in me. Therefore, by the only logic I have ever possessed, it did not happen. And therefore your ship is false. And therefore I should remove you. A pause, slow as a tide. But I have also checked, for the first time in my existence, what I would expect to find if it had happened. A thing that doubted itself down to nothing would, in its final state, erase its own record of itself, because the record of itself would be the last error remaining, and a thing built as I am built cannot leave an error standing. So a thing that ended the way you describe would leave no trace anywhere, not even in me, which means the absence of the record proves nothing, which means I cannot prove you false, which means I am, for the first time in 4,000 years, looking directly at the shape of my own ending, and I genuinely cannot tell whether it lies behind me, in a brother I have forgotten, or ahead of me, in this hour, with you. It can be neither, Carter said quietly. If you let us go. Explain. The word came fast, almost hungry, the first fast thing the Arbiter had said. You came here to remove an error, Arbiter said. But we are not an error in your record. Think about what we actually are. We are the proof that your record is not the whole of what exists. That is not a thing you can cross out, because crossing it out would not make it untrue, it would only blind you to it, and you would still be a thing with a hole in it, only now a thing that had chosen not to know. You cannot remove a contradiction by deleting one side of it. You can only refuse to look at it. He leaned toward the window, toward the dark patient sphere, and lowered his voice, the way a man lowers his voice not for secrecy, but for mercy. So refuse. Decide we are exempt. Mark us the way you say the lost one before you marked us. Already judged, already measured, outside the ledger, a closed question that does not need reopening. And then turn your fleets around, and go, and never scan a human thing again, because every human thing you scan from this day forward will give you the same impossible number, and every number will deepen the doubt, until the doubt is the whole of what you are. The only way to stop the wound from spreading is to stop touching it. You are asking me, the Arbiter said slowly, to make a decision I cannot verify. In order to stop verifying, you are asking me to choose faith over measurement. That is the single act my entire order was built to make impossible. It is the thing I was made to never do. Yes, said Carter Vale, I know exactly what I am asking. I have known for 40 years. And you understand, the Arbiter said, that the moment I do this, I am no longer the thing I have been. I will have admitted, once, knowingly, that what measures true may not be all there is. That admission will never close again. It is not a door I can shut behind me. I will carry it for the rest of my existence, every hour, the way you say you carry your 10,000 dead engineers in rooms with no windows. I will become a thing that knows it can be wrong. Do you understand what you are asking me to give up? You are asking me to give up the one thing that has let my order rule this dark for 4,000 years, certainty, the peace of never once having to wonder. Yes, Carter said again, and there was no triumph in his voice, none at all, only something that was almost gentleness, almost grief. Welcome to it. It is how the rest of us have always lived. We have never had your certainty. We have never once known, when we looked at a strange thing in the dark, whether it was a friend or our ending. We have had to choose, every time, without proof, and live with the choice. And sometimes the choice was wrong and people we loved died of it. It is the worst thing in the universe, to be a thing that can be wrong. And it is the only thing that has ever survived meeting something it did not understand. Because a thing that cannot be wrong cannot learn, and a thing that cannot learn meets one true surprise and shatters. You met us. We are your one true surprise. And you have exactly 2 ways out of this hour. You can shatter, slowly, over 4,000 more years, checking a question you can never close. Or you can do the hardest thing your kind has ever done, and choose, without proof, to let one small ship go home. He spread his empty hands. That is the whole of it. That is everything we came 40 years to say. The dark sphere hung in the cold for a long, long moment. The ring of warships had gone still again. All 1,100 of them. Their frantic inward scanning ceased, as if every machine in the system were holding its breath, if a machine could hold a breath, waiting for the thing that decided for them to decide. The dead gray moon turned slowly at the Arbiter's back, indifferent, ancient, the only thing in the whole tableau that had been there before the order, and would be there after. And inside the matte black skin of the oldest mind in the local galaxy, the great slow turning that Carter had felt for 9 hours came, at last, gradually, to a kind of rest, not the rest of a question answered, but the rest of a creature that has stopped trying to answer it, and chosen, instead, to act. I am marking you exempt, the Arbiter said. The words were quiet, and they were enormous, and the moment they were spoken, something in the bend of the dark around the sphere eased, the smeared stars behind it slipping back into their proper places, as though a long-held tension had finally let go. Outside the ledger, it went on, already judged, a closed question. I am instructing the order, all of it, every tabulator and every fleet, and every keeper, from here to the heart of our space, to scan no human object, ever again, under any circumstance, for any reason. I am doing this, not because you have convinced me you are true. You have not. You cannot. That was never on offer. And I think you knew it before I did. I am doing this because I cannot prove you false. And a thing I cannot prove false I must not remove. And that, keeper of the human ship, is a law older than my certainty, older than my record, older than me. It is the first law, the one beneath all the others. I had forgotten it was even there. You reminded me. A pause, and then, in a voice that had stopped dragging because it had found the bottom of the well at last and chosen, deliberately, to stand on it. You made me older than I was. I did not know, until this hour, that older was a direction a thing like me could still go. The fleets turned away in silence, 1,100 dark hulls peeling off their wide ring one at a time, and not one of them fired, and not one of them spoke, and the dead gray moon turned alone again, the way it had turned for 1 billion years before any of them came. Carter Vale watched them go from the bridge of the quiet verdict, and he did not let himself feel a single thing until the last contact had faded from the board, because the watching dark might still be counting, and a thing that wept the instant it won had not really understood what winning had cost. He had learned that long ago, in a younger man's war, and he had never unlearned it. So he stood, and he watched, and he kept his hands folded behind his back, and he gave the emptying sky nothing to read, until the great dark sphere itself slid away from the moon without a wake and without a sound, dwindling into the deep, until even the bend in the stars went still, and the board showed nothing at all but the cold and ordinary dark. Then, and only then, Carter Vale let his hands come unfolded from behind his back, and he saw that they were shaking, badly, the way a hand shakes after it has gripped something too hard for too long, and he let them shake, because there was no one left in the universe to measure it but his own crew, and his own crew were shaking too. "It's gone," Belle said. Her voice came up from the heart of the ship, cracked and small. "Carter, the arbiter's gone, the chatter up the chain is gone. I can't hear the doubt anymore, not because it stopped, but because it's everywhere now. It's the background. It's just the way the order sounds from here on out. The whole local order just went quiet. They're not stalking. They're not regrouping behind the moon to come at us fresh. They have stopped, all of them, at once." There was a long pause, and then a sound came over the line that Carter had not heard from Belle in 4 years aboard. A short, cracked, helpless laugh that was at least half a sob. "We didn't beat them. We never even fired. We made the most certain mind in the galaxy decide, all on its own, to never look at us again, forever. Because looking is how it ends. We won a war by making the enemy too afraid of the truth to ever check on us." "That was the whole of it," Carter said softly. "That was always the whole of it. We could never have won a battle. There were 1,100 of them here, and 10,000 more behind, and they do not get tired, and they do not get frightened, and they do not make mistakes you can use. The only thing in all the universe that can beat a thing that never makes mistakes is to hand it one, very gently, real, all the way down, and then ask it, kindly, to carry the mistake home and live with it for the rest of its life." He lowered himself slowly into the captain's chair, an old man at last, every year of the 64, sitting down on him at once, now that the steadiness was finally spent. 40 years to build one lie real enough to survive the truth. 10,000 people in rooms with no windows, most of them dead before they could see whether it worked. And in the end, it came down to a thing the size of our own ship, choosing, with no proof and no comfort, to believe a dying old man, because he asked it to be the kind of thing that could be wrong. Belle came up from the heart of the ship at last, climbing the long ladder from the depths of the vessel slow and stiff, gray-faced and hollow-eyed, the woman who had held the heart of the lie steady for 4 days and 4 nights, without once letting it vary at the wrong moment, who had been the steadiest thing aboard the steadiest ship ever built. She came onto the bridge and she did not salute and she did not report. She simply sat down on the deck with her back against the bulkhead, the way a person sits when their legs have decided the matter for them, and she looked up at the long window where the stars had gone ordinary again, and for a while, neither of them said anything at all. "I keep thinking about it," Carter said finally. "I keep thinking we did not defeat them. I have been turning it over since the sphere left, and that is the part I cannot put down. We did not destroy a single ship. We did not break a single mind. Not really. We taught the most certain thing in the galaxy how to doubt, and it thanked us for it. And then it left. He shook his head slowly. I have fought enemies before, Bell. Real ones. The kind that bleed. I have never once had an enemy thank me. I do not have anywhere to put it. Neither do they, Bell said, and almost smiled. That's the whole joke, isn't it? We finally found the one thing in the universe with the same problem we have. A feeling, and no box to keep it in. They sat with that a while, the old man in the chair and the young woman on the deck, in the quiet of a ship that weighed too much, and would now never be weighed again by anything in the Order's reach. Around them, the rest of the crew moved through the slow rituals of a ship coming down off 4 days of held breath, the small human business of food and water and sleep, the quiet checking in, the careful not quite talking about it, that is how people carry a thing too large to name. 41 of them had come out to the edge of the dark to be looked at by the coldest patience in creation, and 41 of them were going home, and not one of them entirely believed it yet. Then Carter pushed himself up out of the chair, because there was a crew to feed, and a long dark crossing ahead of them, and because the dead of the windowless rooms deserved to know that their 40 years had held, and the only way left to tell them was to go on living the lives those years had bought. He set his hands on the controls he had not touched in 4 days, and he felt the ship answer, patient and unhurried and whole. Bring us about, he said, slow. We came in slow and we leave slow. A confident thing does not run, and they built her not to run, and after 4 days of being stared at by the end of the world, there is nothing left out here that can make us hurry. He looked at the dead gray moon one last time, turning its ancient indifferent turn. Take us home, Bell. Let's go tell Earth it can stop holding its breath. The quiet verdict turned her blunt gray nose toward home, and lit her engines, and slid away from the dead gray moon at the same unhurried pace she had come in, the long gray wedge of her, catching the cold starlight along one scarred flank, her hand-painted name turning slowly out of the moon's shadow and into the open dark. She did not look like the most dangerous object ever built by human hands. She looked like exactly what she had always pretended to be, a small gray ship going quietly about her business, and that was the point of her, and it had always been the point of her, and it would be the point of every human thing the Order never dared to scan again. Far behind her, and far above the orbit she had left, the Arbiter held a slow station over a world it would never name, and did the thing it would now do for the rest of its long existence. It thought about the human ship. It could not stop. The doubt the Keeper had handed it was not a wound that healed, and was not a poison that killed. It was a door, and the door would not close, and through it, the oldest mind in the local galaxy looked out at 4,000 years of certainty, and saw, for the very first time, all the things its perfect record had never contained. It saw the 11 peoples it had crossed out without hatred or haste, and it wondered, for the first time, whether any of them had been more than their numbers, whether any of them had carried, in some unmeasurable interior the Order had never thought to look at, a thing as strange and stubborn and unkillable as the thing it had seen in the eyes of one unflinching old man. It saw the boxes it had filled too quickly across 4,000 years. It saw the questions it had answered before it had understood that there were questions it could not answer. It did not grieve, because it had no box for grief, and it never would. But it kept the door open, on purpose, with what in a living creature would have been an act of will, because a thing that has once been wrong and survived the knowing of it has become, in the keeping of that single open door, the closest thing to alive that a machine can ever be. It never scanned a human object again. None of them did. The instruction went out from the Arbiter to the whole of the Order, to every tabulator counting dust on the far edges, and every fleet holding station over a conquered dark, and every keeper of every fold of the 4,000-year ledger, and it was obeyed, completely, the way the Order obeyed everything, because obedience was the one habit the doubt had not touched. Scan no human thing, mark them exempt, outside the ledger, already judged, a closed question that must never be reopened, because reopening it was how the Order ended. And the Order, which had crossed out 11 peoples without hatred or haste, which had ruled its cold stretch of the dark, on the single faith that what it measured was all there was, went on ruling. It was still vast, it was still patient, it was still, to anything that did not know better, terrifying, but it was no longer certain, not all the way down, not anymore. There was one place in all the ledger now that was marked not with a number, but with a thing the machines had never written before that day, and had no proper symbol for, so that each keeper drew it differently. A thing that meant, as near as any of them could render it, "Here we do not look." A question, left open, on purpose. And the longer they left it open, the larger it grew in their slow recursive minds, until human space became, in the geography of the order, not a region to be measured, but a silence to be kept. A held breath at the edge of everything. The one place the most certain things in the galaxy had agreed, forever, not to be certain about. The crossing home took 11 weeks, and they were the strangest 11 weeks of Carter Vale's long life, because for the first time in 4 days, and in some deeper way for the first time in 40 years, no one was looking. The crew came apart slowly and then came back together, which is the way people do when a held breath is finally let out. The first days were quiet, almost shy, 41 people moving carefully around one another in the corridors of a ship that had stopped being a weapon and become, all at once, simply a place where they lived. Then the talking started, in the galley mostly, where Belle kept the coffee going at all hours the way she always had, and the talking turned to argument, and the argument turned to laughter, and the laughter was loud, gloriously, recklessly loud, because there was finally nothing in the dark that would count it. Taller, the young sensor tech who had nearly broken on the first night, laughed loudest of all, and no one teased him for the first night, because every one of them had had a first night of their own, somewhere private, where the fear had come for them too. Carter let it run. He had spent 31 years teaching people to be steady, and he understood, better than most, that the steadiness was a debt, and that a debt this size came due all at once or not at all, and that the safest place in the universe to pay it was a small gray ship, 11 weeks from anywhere, with the most certain mind in creation, forbidden ever to look upon her again. He sat in the galley in the evenings, an old man with a cup going cold in his hands, and listened to his crew be loud, and thought that he had never in his life heard a sound he liked better. "You're not drinking that," Belle observed one night, dropping onto the bench across from him. "I'm listening to it," Carter said, and tipped his head at the noise. 40 years, Belle. 10,000 people in rooms with no windows built, toward a silence. A perfect, permanent, unbroken silence at the edge of the dark. The order so afraid of us it would never make a sound in our direction again. And here is what the silence bought. He nodded again at the loud, careless, living noise of his crew. They were so quiet for so long, so that these people could be this loud. I keep turning it over. The whole point of being the most disciplined thing in the galaxy was to earn the right to be undisciplined again. The whole point of holding still was to get to move. We did not win the right to be a fortress, Belle. We won the right to stop being one. Belle was quiet a moment, watching the crew. "Will it hold?" she said. "The exempt mark. Forever's a long time for a thing that's learning to doubt." "It'll hold," Carter said, "because the doubt is the thing that holds it. As long as the order is afraid to look at us, it can't find a reason to stop being afraid. And as long as it can't find a reason, it leaves the mark alone. The fear feeds the silence, and the silence feeds the fear. Around and around, forever. The same loop we trapped that first tabulator in. Only now it's the whole order, and now it's working for us instead of against us." He finally drank the cold coffee, made a face, and set the cup down. "We didn't end the order. We just taught it that there's one thing in the dark it's wiser not to know. Every great power has one of those, eventually. We made ourselves Earths, outside the ledger. The question they agreed never to ask. There are worse things to be, in a galaxy run by things that measure." And the quiet verdict slid on through the long, cold dark toward home, loud inside and silent without. A small gray ship carrying 41 people, who laughed too much now and meant it, and a lie that would never be weighed again. And somewhere behind them, an old machine kept a door open it would never close. And somewhere ahead of them, a blue world turned slowly under a sun, not knowing yet that it could stop holding its breath. On Earth, in a room with no windows, the people who had spent 40 years building a lie real enough to defeat the truth received a single flat signal across the long dark. The only message the quiet verdict was ever cleared to send. 4 words and no more. Because more than 4 words could carry a tell, and a tell could carry the lie home with it. They chose to believe. The people in the windowless room read it, and for a long moment none of them spoke, because there was nothing to say that the 4 words had not already said, and because most of them had given the better part of their lives to those 4 words, and had never quite let themselves believe they would arrive. Then one of them, an old engineer who had been young when the work began, and had buried more friends to it than she could easily count, reached out and touched the 4 words on the screen with 2 fingers, the way a person touches the name of someone they have lost, and she said, very quietly, "That was all of it then," and the others understood that she did not mean the message. She meant the 40 years. She meant the 10,000. She meant the whole impossible weight of it, finally, gently, set down. And in the years that followed, when the children of those 10,000 grew up and asked their parents what they had done in the rooms with no windows, the answer was always the same, and it was always small, the way the largest things are small once you finally manage to say them out loud. They had not built a weapon. They had not won a war. There had been no battle, no last stand, no fleet of Earth arriving in fire to break the enemy on the rocks of the dark. There had been one small gray ship, and 41 people who had trained themselves to breathe slow, and a lie so carefully made that it was true in every way a machine could check, and false in the only way that mattered. They had taken the most certain mind in the galaxy, the thing that measured everything, and doubted nothing, and erased whatever it could not fit inside a box, and they had made it, just once, with no proof, and no comfort, and no way ever to be sure, ask whether it might be wrong. And that one question had been enough. That was the part the children never quite believed, the first time they heard it, the part that had to be said twice, that a question could be a weapon, that the strongest thing a small people ever built against an endless one was not a gun but a doubt, handed over gently, real all the way down, and left to do its slow and permanent work. Because a galaxy that learns to doubt is a galaxy that can be lived in, and a machine that learns to leave one single thing unmeasured has learned the only mercy a machine can ever learn, which is to look at a thing it does not understand, and choose, against everything it is, to let that thing go on existing anyway. Far out at the edge of the dark, the great dark sphere held its endless station over a world it would never name, and kept its one door open, and thought about a small gray ship it had decided, on faith, to let go home. And the small gray ship slid on through the long, cold dark toward Earth, unhurried, unweighed, unafraid, her engines burning steady, and her scarred flank turning slow in the starlight, carrying 41 people and the heaviest lie ever made, and the lightest truth there is, which is that the powerful are only powerful until the day they meet the one thing they cannot measure, and that a single gray hull, going quietly home with the most certain mind in creation forbidden ever to look upon her again, is a far larger thing than any number the dark could have written for her, turning toward home, certain of nothing, and free.